This Squirecast podcast is brought to you by me, Daniel Henderson, and my new book, The Spiritual Journey to Anti-Racism, a travel guide for white people. This book will take you on an inner spiritual journey to discover the white supremacist script that every white person has been given, without their consent. It provides a pathway through the white supremacist script and will help you to rewrite that script into an anti-racist life. Available now on Amazon. This
Well. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Second Cup with Keith. I'm your host, Keith Giles. So, yeah, good to have you all here. And hold on, I got to fix some things here as usual, doing my self-production here. Welcome to Second Cup with Keith, where we're live every Monday. I promised in the last episode I was going to talk about something that was pretty interesting that was in my book Sola Mysterium. So I'm going to talk about that right now. Do I have any other announcements to make? Oh yeah, I have extended. I will do this little plug before I get into it. Couple things, I guess. Yeah, so I have extended my sale. If you go to Choir Academy, QUOIR Academy.com, that's where you'll find all my online courses, as well as lots of other courses by other instructors. It's a really cool platform. But all of my courses are on sale. So all of my Jesus Son courses, the Sola Mysterium course, the Sola Deus course, the Quantum Sayings of Jesus course, Rewiring Your Brain, even the conference we did in Nashville, last year, 2 years ago, something like that. Anyway, they're all 50% off. All of my courses are 50% off. If you use the code Xmas, Xmas at checkout. Now I've noticed just that someone just told me this. Someone tried to go in and buy multiple courses to use the code, and apparently there's not a cart. This is a limitation of the site, of the platform. We need to look into this. But it'll only let you buy one at a time. So you have to buy one, use the code, and then close that transaction. Then you have to go back and buy the next one, use the code, and do one at a time. So sorry for that. You can't just do a whole bunch of them, put the code in and get them all in one big shot if you want to buy more than one. Anyway, the sale is going on. I decided to extend that to the end of the year because I was doing it first for only a week, and I had a lot of people come back to me after it expired and say, oh, I meant to do it, didn't get around to it. Can you extend it? So I did. That's number one. Number two, what else? I have a few copies of the Quantum Sayings of Jesus. You can see them over my shoulder here in the video. Available, signed, U.S. customers. I think they're $20. I think the book is like $20 or $25 on Amazon. And then, of course, you pay shipping if you don't have Prime. But if you get them directly from me, it's $20 plus $5 shipping, and I'll sign them for you. If you want to get a copy signed of the Quantum Sayings of Jesus while I still have them, you can just email me, keith@choir.com, KEITH at QUOIR.com, and we can do that. All right, so let's jump into what I said I was going to talk about. This is from chapter 6 of Sola Mysterium, and it's kind of talking about what do we really know. It's questioning all the things we think we know, and what I'm trying to do is spark your curiosity and also your sense of wonder, and also point out that things we think we know, we really don't know. And I kick off the chapter by talking about something that I come across in some of my research that was so amazing. So first, I'm going to talk about, let's think about those of you who are old like me. Think about the world before the internet. Some of you don't know the world before the internet because you weren't born before there was an internet, or you weren't old enough to know what the world was like before there was an internet. But if you're my age, you do. You remember, I was in what, late 90s, something like that, when I worked for a company that had the internet. There was one computer that would go on the internet. We didn't have them on our personal computers yet at our desks, but there was a separate computer that was wired to the internet, and we had to basically schedule time to go on that one and, look up things online and stuff like that. It was a crazy time, but, most of us nowadays, even if you're like me and you can remember life before the internet, you really still can't imagine it. Like, we have gotten so dependent on Google Maps, for example. Most of us don't even know our own phone numbers, or our phone numbers of our friends, because we just got them saved in our phones, right? And we just share contacts and things like that. But yeah, we've lost some of that. And we also, like, for example, most of us wouldn't know our friends' birthdays if it didn't pop up on Facebook and remind you, oh, your friend's birthday is today. So, in many ways, we become very dependent on the World Wide Web to live our modern lives, right? We couldn't, if I was going to go somewhere, a lot of times, even when I'm going to a friend's house that I've been to probably 4 or 5 times, I will still pop their address into Google Maps just in case there's an accident along the way and it wants to reroute me, or in case I just forget the house number or whatever, right? So, and you're probably the same way, right? A lot of us do this. So as we become more and more dependent on the internet, I want you to think about what the internet is, right? I've seen maps. In fact, I just saw something online the other day. It was a map of the planet Earth, of the globe, and it was showing like cables, right? There are cables literally wrapping around the planet Earth under the ocean. Okay. Yes, a lot of it is satellite, right? So we do use a lot, like cellular information. We use a lot of satellite information. GPS uses satellite, but most of our internet is literally physical cables plugged into hubs that run from, New York to Paris to London, to, like, all over the world. China, Australia, everything. And seeing that map of the planet with these cables mapped out, I was like, man, can you imagine? Like, how do you make a cable that's thousands of miles long? Like, literally, we have made cables that will wrap around the planet more than once. It's really astounding, really amazing. But so what if I told you, though, there was, before the internet, before we created the internet as we know it today, right, in the mid 90s, what if I told you there was a World Wide Web, a worldwide network, communication network, where detailed information could be shared and connections could be established across hundreds and even thousands of miles without electricity, without satellites, without smartphones, without cell towers? And I'm not talking about Pony Express. I'm not talking about the Postal Service. I'm talking about a real network that really existed that communicated detailed information hundreds and thousands of miles without electricity. And by the way, it's still going on right now. It's still happening. So it's not like we used to have this and then we don't anymore. It's still going on. It still exists. So this global communications network has really been around for millions of years. It was discovered in the 19th century by a German biologist named Albert Frank. So what am I talking about? Well, it's something that the research that I was doing, the author called it the Wood Wide Web. The Wood Wide Web. Wood, like wood, trees. Because it's a clever way to describe this mind-bending communication method that's used by trees and fungi as part of Earth's natural internet. So what Albert Frank discovered was this fascinating symbiotic relationship between the roots of trees and plants with fungal colonies that grow around them. And he described this phenomenon as mycorrhiza. It's a really weird spelled name, mycorrhiza. And today we know that roughly 90% of all land-based plants are connected to this vast communications network. It's pretty similar to humans, right? But probably about 90% of humans on planet Earth have a cell phone or a computer or some way connected to the internet. It may be less than that, actually. It might be like 70 or 80%. But yeah, it's pretty amazing. So it's not a surprise that fungi aid plants with, in growing and contributes to the health of trees and forests. We've known that for a long time. We've known, for example, since the 1960s, that mushrooms help plants locate water sources, and they even provide essential nutrients through mycelia strands around the root systems. But we also have learned that fungi can also protect trees and other plants from disease by providing counteractive compounds stored in their roots, which are triggered when the plants are attacked. So in return, in exchange, this is a symbiotic relationship, plants feed their fungi friends a diet of nutritious carbohydrates, which they need to thrive. But it's not just protection from threats and disease that the network offers. It also allows the trees and the plants an opportunity to communicate with one another in ways that are startlingly similar to the way the U.S. Department of Defense's ARPANET operates. And the U.S. Department of Defense's ARPANET actually was modeled after the way fungus communicates with trees like this. Maybe you didn't know that. But the earliest form of the internet, which was the U.S. Department of Defense's ARPANET, behaves very similar to this. So it's interesting, isn't it? The internet that we currently use isn't just similar to, it's actually patterned after and modeled after this Wood Wide Web. So some scientists have gone as far, as to compare this vast tree fungi symbiotic network, this communications network, to the human nervous system. So there's another layer and pattern of connection and connectivity that we notice, these similar patterns. The human nervous system works pretty much the same way. That's pretty wild. And just think about that for a minute while I get a sip of tea. So an example of how this Wood Wide Web works. There were studies done in 1983, and it proved that different trees use this network to warn each other, to communicate with each other about invasive insects species. So this is quoting from the research. When one tree becomes infested, it warns others begin producing anti-insect chemicals to protect against that specific attack. These signals are sent through the air. Since the late 90s, however, researchers have proven that trees transfer carbon, nitrogen, phosphorus, and other nutrients back and forth using this mycelia, the fungi. And again, quoting the research, quote, when infected with blight, Tomato plants release a chemical signal to warn other plants nearby. These plants also eavesdrop on their neighbors to determine when to build up their defenses against oncoming pathogens. And then also, still quoting, a 2013 study found that broad beans, it's a species of beans, legume, broad beans also signaled neighbors through fungal networks about aphid infestations. So we are not the first biological species to develop a global communications network that allows us to communicate vital information, share gossip about our neighbors, and respond to the world around us. We copied that to create the internet, which is what you're using at this moment to listen to this podcast. And if you're watching live, to watch this video. We simply copied that, and we added, cat videos and emojis and stuff like that. So I just think that is such a fascinating thing when you think about it. And I guess, and I don't do this in Sola Mysterium, but I'm going to do it now, is to draw a comparison between the levels of intelligence exhibited by the symbiotic relationship between fungus and plants to levels of consciousness, right? So I do talk about this in Sola Mysterium, also talk about it in Sola Deus, this idea of consciousness, right? And this normally gets into the quantum side of things when we're thinking about not just human consciousness. I think this is part of the quantum level thing, right? Like, I know a lot of scientists, a lot of psychologists are studying human consciousness and what it is and trying to define it. And it's not easy, right, to define what consciousness is and isn't and what sets human consciousness apart. So far, all of the research that I'm aware of is looking at human consciousness, right? Which we would say is the sort of highest level, highest form of consciousness. Of course we think that because it's us, right? As if we could possibly know what levels of consciousness other living things could be experiencing at this moment, right? The ability or the lack of ability of those other living organisms to communicate to us the level and the depth of their conscious experience doesn't prove that we have a better and a higher developed sense of consciousness than they do. It simply means that either they are incapable of communicating that experience to us. Maybe they don't care to, they don't have a desire to or a need to. Or maybe it's our inability. Maybe they are trying to communicate it to us and we have an inability to understand it and to process it, right? So again, we always assume we're the top of the chain, right? We make assumptions about our uniqueness. But is that true? Right? We don't know that. I say this all the time, that when it comes to the idea of like saying like in the Bible, when it says that, again, a book written by humans, about humans and about God. In that book, we say that humans were made in the image of God, as if everything else wasn't made in the image of God, right? And I always ask this question. I pose this question, sort of rhetorical question, but I want you to think about what the answers to this question could be. I wonder if dolphins think that they are made in the image of God. I mean, do we know? And if they did, if dolphins are swimming around and we could somehow learn how to communicate with them one day, which I think might actually happen one day, who knows? I think AI has done a lot to like crack codes and solve a lot of mysteries when it comes to communication, things like that. Who knows? One day we might be able to duplicate and translate the speech of animals, dolphins, things like that. But anyway, let's say one day we do that and we communicate with dolphins and we find out that they also have profound consciousness, experience of consciousness, maybe even more profound than our own. Maybe that we have things to learn from them spiritually. Again, until we learn to communicate with them, we would never know about it. What if we communicated with dolphins and whales and things like that, and they told us that they were made in the image of God? And they might even debate back with us and say, and you're not because blah, blah, blah. Same way we would debate back with them. Well, you're not because you can't blah, blah, blah. But see, if they can reason, if they have a consciousness that's equal to or even higher and greater than our own consciousness, then how could we, right? We'd have to adjust our understanding of consciousness in general. But yeah, so but now think about it. Those are mammals, right? Dolphins, whales, they have much bigger brains than we do, I think. And so that's probably why I quite often will go to that example of dolphins or whales, because physically their brains are bigger. That doesn't mean because their brains are bigger and more complicated that they are more capable than or equally capable of consciousness or self-awareness as we are. But maybe they are. I think that's the most likely one. But when I share this information that I just did about fungus and trees having a global communications network where they are capable of communicating dangers and threats. And that's just what we're aware of. Maybe there's other things they're communicating that we are not aware of. Maybe those are the things that are easier to detect, right? But trees, fungus, like a mushroom, right? And so I think quite often when we hear that kind of stuff, I don't know about you, when you read about that, when you hear what I just told you about, what fungus and trees have been doing for hundreds and thousands of years before we ever came up with the possibility of duplicating that ourselves. I wonder why we don't, because most of the time we don't equate that with intelligence, right? When we do it, it's intelligence, right? Wow. The human that came up with this internet thing is genius, right? We are so intelligent, right? We've got this technology. We would even point to our own technological advancements, the fact that we've got iPhones and the internet and AI and all this technology that we have. We would even use that to sort of prove to ourselves that the humans alive today, are more technologically advanced than humans were 100 years ago, right? Because they were smart enough to figure out what we have figured out, right? We're smarter than they are. No, we're really not. I'll talk about that in a second, I think. But anyway, we equate these advances in technology and communication with a certain degree of intelligence. And then when we find out that we are the second species on this planet to have come up with this, and that in fact, in many ways, the only way we came up with it was sort of by looking over the shoulder of trees and fungi and sort of cheating on the test. Like we were smart enough to learn from them that they were doing something that we could not do. And in some ways, you could argue they're better at it because they can do it without electricity. They don't need a computer. They don't need electricity. They don't need internet. They don't need a modem. They don't need a computer screen and all that stuff. They don't need a microphone, a podcast to do this, to communicate. But we do, right? So in some ways, we have more limitations than they do. Now we could argue again, like I said, well, we can shoot video and we can create emojis and memes and things like that. Okay, haha. But again, we just don't even know what they're capable of doing. So anyway, I'm just wondering, like, why don't we equate that with intelligence? Why wouldn't we say, wow, trees are really smart. Fungi are really smart. We act as if these were accidental um, advancements that nature just sort of fumbled along accidentally and tripped over this communication network that rivals anything we could have done. And they did it for thousands of years before we even had electricity, right? While we were still playing with rocks and sticks, rubbing sticks together to make fire in a cave, trees and fungi already had this global communications network. So that's one thing, right? Thinking about it in terms of intelligence. But let's also think about it in terms of consciousness, right? So there is a certain level, and for some people, these are interchangeable. I don't think they should be interchangeable. I think they're different things. Like, I think someone cannot be very intelligent. An individual person could be not necessarily super intelligent, but could have an incredible capacity for a very highly developed sense of consciousness and awareness, right? It's more about the awareness of the universe, the world around them, certain spiritual truths that transcend and are separate from information and intelligence. Like, so what if what's going on with this wood wide web with fungi and trees and plants and things like that? What if it's not intelligence? And I think, a lot of people, as I said, would probably agree. Yeah, that doesn't prove they're intelligent. But what if it proves they're conscious? I mean, I think it's a very strong argument that plants and trees and fungi have a level of consciousness. They have to have a self-awareness to know that they need to protect themselves. They have to have a self-awareness, a consciousness, that they are aware of living beings outside of themselves that are not also plants or trees. You know what I'm saying? Like, a pine tree has to be aware that it's a pine tree, that it's surrounded by other pine trees. It has to be aware that there are other living organisms around it, on the ground, in the dirt, or surrounded in the roots around it, that are not pine trees, but are alive and can cooperate and collaborate together. That's really what symbiosis, can't talk today. That's really what symbiosis is, right? The symbiotic relationship is two living organisms that benefit from one another and survive and thrive because of their ability to collaborate and work together. That's what symbiosis is. So a tree, people, do you hear what I'm saying? A living piece of wood made up of roots and bark and branches and leaves has a level of consciousness that it is aware of its own existence, the existence of others like itself in the forest, the existence of others not like itself, and the benefit of working together with those other organisms so that they all can thrive and survive. Against a third party of organisms, which it recognizes are also different from itself and different from the fungi, but are dangerous to them, right? Aphids, bugs, blight, things like this. That is pretty crazy. Isn't that insane? It's not insane. It's fascinating. And I think then I think this should be included in the conversation that scientists are having about consciousness. Now, I understand we are more focused on human consciousness, but But we would probably agree that human consciousness is the most complicated, right? The most developed. Again, we might be wrong about that. I think we could be wrong about that. I think we may be wrong to think of it in a hierarchical sense. It may be more about distribution. It may be more of a flat concept of consciousness, not rather than hierarchical. Or maybe concentric circles kind of a thing. I've talked about on this podcast. I've talked about spiral dynamics, for example. So, it could be that. It could be that level of stuff. But anyway, I think my point is that it's more of a challenge, I would think, for humans to study and comprehend and make sense of human consciousness. But we might be more capable of understanding plant consciousness, right? Fungi consciousness. Like, if we would admit to ourselves that it's possible that they have a level of consciousness, that we could explore that. We could maybe try to understand that. In other words, I'm saying it's about building maybe layers of levels of understanding of consciousness. I just think there's something there, right? And I think you can make the mistake of going too far on the science side and saying that this is just that this Wood Wide Web global communications network symbiotic relationship between fungi and plants is, again, just sort of an accident of evolution and natural selection, and that we shouldn't get confused that, oh, this has nothing to do with intelligence, this has nothing to do with consciousness, it's just this natural process, blah, blah, blah. You could go that way, sure. I think there's more going on than that. I think there's very good reason to think there's more going on than that. And of course, I mean, you can go the other direction theologically, and you can say, well, God designed it this way. And so God's the one with the intelligence. God's the one who's imparting the qualities of consciousness to these inanimate, or slightly, not inanimate because they're plants, to these living organisms, again, that are simple, that lack consciousness. And he's imparting these qualities onto them, almost like sort of maybe God's fingerprint, right, in a way. But that's all it is. It's just God's fingerprint. It's not, it's not a proof of anything like that. Yeah, I'm kind of in the middle, I guess. I would say I don't think it's a complete accident of natural selection that plants and trees have a communication network that's exactly like the one that we created only in the last what, 30 years or something, 25, 30 years. That they've had it for thousands of years, and we just figured it out and copied it. And that makes us more intelligent, more evolved, makes us more sophisticated than those silly, stupid, simple little plants who don't know what we know and are not intelligent and don't have consciousness. I guess what I'm talking about is there's sort of a species-wide arrogance that humans have, right? That human pride, that we think we're the ones made in the image of God and no other created being, no other living thing in creation can claim to be created in the image of God. We're the height of consciousness in the universe, and nothing else, and that nothing else could have an experience of consciousness the same way that we do. Well, that's convenient. right? That really makes us feel good. We've exalted ourselves to this very exalted level, right? High level of we're the top of the chain, only because A, we haven't discovered anything uh, to contradict that. But honestly, number two, we're not looking very hard. We're not really looking very hard. Um, yeah, I just watched. This is going to feel like a tangent, but I think this is an interesting correlation and a comment to what I'm talking about here. There's a really great film called Solaris, and it's based on a book also called Solaris. So the film is by one of my favorite directors. His name is Andrei Tarkovsky. Yes, there was a remake with George Clooney. Don't watch that version. It's not as good. The deep philosophical film by Andrei Tarkovsky, Solaris, is the better one, in my opinion. Certainly, at least for this conversation, because it goes in the direction I'm about to go in. There's a line in the film, which I think is mirrored in the. There may not be a verbatim line of dialogue in the novel by Stanislaw Lem, although the novel is excellent as well. The novel's great, and the film and the novel, while they're not exactly the same, they do deal with some very similar themes. Anyway, there's a line in the film, excuse me, echoed in the book, but I just watched the film again recently, so it's fresh in my mind. And one of the scientists, so in the film, in the novel, humans have explored the deepness of space, the reaches of space. We have found a planet called Solaris, and the planet itself seems to be intelligent. The planet itself has consciousness, at least. If not intelligence, consciousness, again, sometimes interchangeable. But of course, it's very difficult for us as human beings to communicate with this completely foreign alien being that's an entire planet that has consciousness. And it's that the gaps between our ability to communicate with this planet-wide consciousness that's creating all kinds of frustration for humans and misunderstandings and unintended consequences. But there's a line, one of the scientists in the film says, he has a little speech, and I'm going to paraphrase it, but he says something to the effect of that humans don't, like when humans go into space to explore space, they're not looking for something truly alien. We're looking for a reflection of ourselves. What we want when we go out into space, when we explore, what we go out into space looking for is a reflection of ourselves. What we want is a mirror. We don't want the truth. And I thought that is exactly right. And I think that is very true in a lot of scientific studies, especially around this idea of consciousness. We are kind of blinded by our own image, by our own, like we're in love with ourselves. Our egos are so inflated, gets in the way of true scientific study that is completely agnostic and doesn't have these unconscious built-in assumptions about our own exalted, elevated place in the universe, right? And so if we go out into the universe and we're looking for a reflection of ourselves, another human, another mind like our own, that would validate, yes, indeed, see, humans are the greatest, the most powerful, the most intelligent, the highest form of consciousness in the universe. It's humans. And if we go out there and find other humans, that would just validate that assumption. But what if we go out there and what we find is something infinitely more intelligent than we are? But it's not anything close to anything like human. It's like a whole planet, right? It's this ecosystem. It's everything, right? It's an ocean, it's atmosphere, it's kelp, it's photosynthesis, it's plants and animals and microbes and It's all of it. Like all of it is the living consciousness, is the living being that embodies this higher consciousness. We would reject that. That's not what we want to see. We don't want to know that. We don't want to embrace that because that diminishes us. That's something so beyond our brain's ability to grasp. We'll reject it. And that's kind of what happens in the film and in the book. Like we've been studying in the film and in the book, we've been studying Solaris for decades. And of course, scientists have all kinds of theories and they all get debunked one at a time. And we are, after all this time studying this consciousness, this planet, we're no closer than we were to cracking the code, right? So, of course, you can guess someone comes up with the sort of final solution, like all we can think of after exhausting all of these intellectual pursuits and studies and theories. Someone says, well, maybe we should just send down a nuclear missile into the planet and blow it up and see what happens. And I think it's the most frustratingly human reaction because I think, you know what, that is exactly what we would do. I'm not even sure we would wait decades to do it. That might even be the first thing we would do. Right? Let's poke it with a nuclear missile and see what happens. Because again, that's about us exerting our power, us exerting our aggression, our violence on something we do not understand and comprehend. And if we can't understand it, at least we can enslave it. At least if we can't understand it, at least we can make sure it knows we mean business. You know what I mean? I think this is, again, part of our limitation. So again, why am I telling you this? Why did I read this chapter from Sola Mysterium today? Why am I bringing up this whole thing about the Wood Wide Web and all that stuff? Really, it's just to have a conversation about consciousness. It's to hopefully spark our imagination to recognize something I say all the time, right? This mantra of quantum science, that the quantum field is everything, and everything is the quantum field. And if that's true, and I believe it absolutely, it is very, 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 very true. It's maybe the ultimate truth. The quantum field is everything, and everything is the quantum field. Another way to say that is consciousness is everything, and everything is consciousness. Now, there may be varying levels and degrees by which consciousness is manifest or expressed in the universe, right? In reality. And we are one of those expressions. Maybe we're one of the most special and wonderful expressions of consciousness that the universe has ever come up with. Of course, it only came up with it, at the end of the time spectrum here, right? Because the universe and consciousness has been around. Consciousness has embodied the universe, or I should say the universe has embodied consciousness for billions and billions of years, trillions of years, right? And right here, just in the last few 100,000, maybe if you want to say 1,000,000 years, humans have come onto the scene. Are we really the first? Is it possible that humans are only the first living beings to have this conscious awakening and awareness? Isn't it possible that consciousness and awareness has always been here? Again, maybe in different strengths and expressions and levels, but maybe even more. I mean, there could have been countless other living beings, and maybe they weren't physical, human, flesh and blood. Maybe they weren't mammals. Maybe they were plants. Maybe they were birds. Maybe they were planets. Maybe there are literally planets that embody an unimaginable level of consciousness. Well, why not? To me, that makes a lot of sense. That makes a whole lot of sense. And so, again, if these interchangeable terms, quantum field is everything, everything's a quantum field. Consciousness is everything, everything is consciousness. The fact the universe exists is proof that consciousness exists. Because that is what set everything in motion. And the point of creation is so that consciousness can experience itself. And the ways, one of the ways, many ways that consciousness experiences itself is in these sort of networks. I think this Wood Wide Web is just a tiny, tiny, tiny example of the ways in which the consciousness expressed in fungi communicate with and have a relationship with and an awareness of and an understanding of trees and plants is yet another one example of billions of expressions and examples of the ways in which one consciousness is aware of and cooperates and collaborates with another consciousness. Now, again, they're all the same consciousness, but they're expressions of the one consciousness. So there are built-in ways in which these conscious elements connect. That the ways that they're intended to connect. That these aren't accidents. It's not, again, it's just accidents and natural selection, whatever. That if consciousness is what everything is, and everything is consciousness and expressions of this consciousness. And if the point of creation is so that this one consciousness can express and experience itself in various different forms, we shouldn't be surprised when we see these kinds of things. Again, I talked a couple of weeks ago about that we are, how did I say it? We're expressions of a lonely God. We're, something like that. The idea of that God is this great lonely, because God in its oneness is a great loneliness, and that there has to be these creation itself is sort of embodying all these different expressions of the single consciousness so that there can be collaboration, communication, connection, expression of these kind of things. So that's why I'm sharing that, because I didn't get it when I wrote it in the book. When I wrote that chapter in Soul Mysterium, I did not connect that dot that I'm connecting right now, where I was just sharing it as an oddity, isn't that amazing? Wow, isn't that cool, right? I just want to provoke wonder and awe and get you to think about, your curiosity about this one little thing. But now I'm thinking yeah, it is amazing, and it is wonderful, and it is curious. But what does it really mean? And I think that's what it means. I have a comment. Judy Springsteen says, I believe that if everyone believed and embraced this, war would end and all suffering would end. Exactly. Yeah, I say this in Sola Mysterium. I say this in Sola Deus. I had planned to write a book. One of these days, I'll probably write a book about this. Because I think this concept, if we can get it, this quantum spirituality, this quantum consciousness idea that we find in the Gospel of Thomas, that we find in the Gospel of Mary, that we find in Rumi, that we find in other mystics and other religions, Black Elk and Sufi mystics, and just on and on, Buddhism. This idea of the oneness of all things, the idea that separation is an illusion. I agree, Judy. I absolutely think this is what I call the answer to everything. This is the way we are capable, if we can really wrap our minds around this as individuals, but also as a human species, if humanity could really, really, truly get this. Like, we should be teaching this to our children before they can speak. You know, we should create a community and a society and a nation of people who all deeply understand and know to their core that they are connected to one another. Because again, that would be the end of war. I can't kill you because killing you would be killing myself. I can't let you starve and suffer because that will be letting, the divine consciousness suffer. Because I would see reflected in everyone else, I would see reflected the image of God and the image of humanity. The shared divinity and the shared humanity. I believe it is the end to poverty. It's the end to war, genocide. It's the end to political divisions. Yeah, it's just, I think it is. I think it's the answer to everything. So, something to think about, right? I guess if nothing else this morning, I wanted to give you something to think about. I would love to know your thoughts. You can send me an email, keith@choir.com. You can leave a reply to this post. If you're watching on YouTube or Facebook or Instagram, leave a comment. I'd love to know what you think about it. And again, any thoughts or ideas you have for future episodes, right? I want to use this space. This is, I made a conscious decision a few months ago to step away from conversations that were dealt with politics. And because again, politics is all about separation and division. I don't want to do that anymore. I want to focus on this kind of thing because I do think it's the answer to everything. Again, Socrates' idea that the best way to bring about change is not to fight the old, but to build the new. And that's what I want to do. I'm trying to build the new. And I think building the new is the way I want to go. And the way I want to go is in this podcast, communicating these ideas to give us an imagination of our oneness and our connection. So yeah, I am currently working on, if you're following my inner circle, which is every Friday, this is accessible through my Patreon at $4 a month. You can get every Friday. I've been posting, this is how I wrote the Gospel of Thomas book. So I started off doing the Gospel of Thomas. I finished that, published the book. Then I switched to the Gospel of Truth. I finished the commentary on the Gospel of Truth. I am now in the Gospel of Mary. And I've just, in the last couple of weeks, have really gone pretty deep into writing the book for the Gospel of Mary. And loving it. It's been so fun because I'm seeing these same kind of ideas in the Gospel of Mary, and it's really exciting. I mean, I fell in love with the Gospel of Thomas, and I'm definitely falling in love with the Gospel of Mary right now. And so that book is going to be the Quantum Sayings of Mary and the Lost Gospel of Truth. It'll be a combination of those two texts together in one book. So I'm excited about that. So if you want to read kind of like what I'm doing every week as I'm publishing my research on that, you can follow me on Patreon, patreon.com/Keith Giles, or you can go to my Patheos blog, keithgiles.com, and just click on any of the inner circle posts, and you'll get a prompt. A little pop-up window will pop up and invite you to subscribe. So you can subscribe there for $5 a month. That's why I kind of recommend the Patreon one, because it's $4 a month, and you also get everything else I post on Patreon in addition to the Friday posts. But whatever you want to do, it's up to you. But I'm continuing to talk about the Gospel of Mary. Again, this over the weekend, I had some incredible conversations with my friend Libby Schrader Polzer. She's been sending me stuff and answering my questions, and she's a leading scholar on the Gospel of Mary, and I'm so excited about this book. I'm beginning to construct it right now as a book and getting more and more excited about what that's going to look like. So that should be out probably in June of next year. That's my goal. I want to get it out by June of next year. And but yeah, you get to read it sort of in advance if you are a subscriber on Patreon or a supporter on Patreon. All right. And anyway, thank you all for listening. Thank you for liking and sharing and subscribing. Thank you for your feedback. I will do this again next week. So we'll hope you have a good Christmas. We'll do one more next Monday on the 30th before we go into the new year. And I look forward to that, to talking to you then. In the meantime, you guys have a great day. Have a great week. And yeah, we'll talk to you later. Take care.